Swag is back. After a year-long hiatus, he came back and dropped two bangers practically back to back. He dropped one a couple of weeks ago, and it was titled, What If Naruto Could Use Every Jutsu? Pretty good video, but not the video we're going to be talking about today. He posted one 3 weeks ago, and it was titled, Naruto Was Always the Underdog. And it was a very well put together video. It had to do going over misconceptions about Naruto as a character and Naruto as the series in whole, a lot of misinterpretations or perhaps false understandings of the series have come along, and basically he just deconstructed it. A very good video. I agreed with the entire premise of the entire video. So why am I making this video? Well, it is because it's something he said that kind of got my cogs turning a little bit. It made me wonder, is that actually true? And if it is true, how true is it? And you guys don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to show you a quick clip of what I'm talking about here.
Now, some of you are probably thinking that what I just said is ridiculous. Surely being the son of the 4th Hokage and a particularly blessed member of the Uzumaki clan means Naruto should be predisposed to being a good ninja, right? No, that's not how that works. If you're good at something, your kid isn't going to be automatically good at that thing. Sometimes that sort of thing happens. Some famous singers are the children of other famous singers, so on and so forth, but it's not so common that we can say it's a guarantee. And usually this happens as a result of the child receiving some kind of help or instruction from the parent in question, which Naruto obviously didn't. If they'd actually survived and had taught Naruto the same way other ninja have been shown instructing their children, then we could talk about privilege as far as this is concerned. But that's not what happened.
Okay, so that is the clip that got my kind of cogs turning, and it made me wonder, how true is that sentiment? I mean, it kind of logically makes sense. Just because you're good at something or your parents were good at something doesn't mean that you or your children will also be good at that thing. You just won't be, there's no like clear evidence that you would be born good towards that thing. But how true is it? It goes against me personally because I've heard sayings like this a lot. I've heard sayings like, oh, it runs in the family, or oh, it's in the genes, obviously alluding to the fact that your family is like predisposed to be skilled or talented or know how to do like XYZ thing. So it kind of goes against my predetermined thing. So that is what I want to do in this video. I want to fact check this statement right here. Is it true or is it false that being good at something, that your offsprings will also be good at that something? So I haven't looked into it yet, so we're gonna look into it right now and I'll come back to you with the results. Okay, we're back. And there's actually a lot of resources I was able to find on this. And I didn't know that it would be so prevalent. Like, there's a lot of research and studies that have gone into this. But now that I read about it a little bit more, I kind of understand why there is so much research on it. And it's because being able to have talent identifications for people in society would be very beneficial for our society. But I didn't know that was a thing, but it's a thing. And let's go over what we have found. So what I have found is kind of twofold. There are a lot of links to your proficiency in certain things or your proclivities for certain things based off of genetic factors. For example, one thing that I found was the link between intelligence and genetics. For example, here in this research article, The New Genetics of Intelligence, where it says here, recent genome-wide association studies have successfully identified inherited genome sequence differences that account for 20% of the 50% heritability of intelligence. So intelligence is one factor which is heritable. I'm not going to say that Naruto is stupid, but Minato was clearly a prodigy, and Naruto is a prodigy in its own right. So that is kind of a privilege that he was granted, at least to some extent. But that is not really the only thing that we can measure on. For example, intelligence is one facet that could go into people in society, but also character and Naruto's proclivities. But there's other things. What about skills, like things like sports? Well, we can see here in this research article where it basically measured the differences in music, arts, writings, language, chess, math, sports, whatever you can find. And it basically summarized that in general, the genetic architecture for aptitude and talents was similar in men and women, and genetic factors contribute to a large extent to variation in aptitude and talent across different domains of all these previously listed abilities. So yes, to a certain extent, your genomes and your genetic, here it pronounces it as genetic architecture, can influence how good or your aptitude in some certain field. So if we can link this back to something like the skill of throwing a kunai. I don't know, something ridiculous that if your parents or if your lineage had like a proclivity for being good kunai throwers and it was linked to some genetic sequence that they had that made them they could flick their wrists, aim better, that advantage that is within that family, within that lineage, can also come down to you. There are severe weaknesses that come with only looking at genes for this. So this next article that I found basically goes over the exact same thing. It restates the exact same thing. We found that sports, like talent in sports, can be identified through genome testing. But there is a caveat that they kind of put within this report, and it says, while genetic testing has the potential to assist in the identification of future talented performers, genetic tests should be combined with other tools to obtain accurate identification of those athletes predisposed to succeed in sport. It kind of touches on it here, but there's one more article that I was able to find that kind of goes into not kind of debunk the structure, but kind of to say that only looking at genome testings for talent identification is a wrong approach. It's this next article here. It's the conventional and genetic talent identification in sports. Will recent developments trace talent? And its conclusion is that conventional and genetic testings reveal a number of methodological and technical limitations, and parallels are summarized in terms of the test designs, the point in time of testing, psychological skills or traits, and unknown interactions between different variables. So if we were kind of to make an example of what they're saying here, it is like if your parents were like professional basketball athletes, they're just naturally tall, like that's their natural height, and then they have you as a child. Now, both of them, by virtue of their sport or being the best in the sport, they are like inclined to be tall because that's kind of what basketball entails. Because of their genotype of them being tall, you will also be tall. That is your phenotype. You will have the observable trait of being tall based on having those height genes kind of passed down to you. But just because you are tall does not necessarily mean you are good at basketball. While you may have received the phenotype for the height, which is generally considered a positive for the skill of basketball, being tall does not directly equate to being good at basketball. That's a false logical statement. One does not inherently lead to the other. Being tall can aid in your skill at basketball or the heights you're able to reach playing basketball, but it is not directly inclusive for that being the case. And I knew this to be the case actually when I was researching for the Dress to Impress video I made and how you can learn fashion from that video. I ran into this article here. And within this article called The Complexity of Greatness Beyond Talent or Practice, it dives into the dichotomy of the question of nature versus nurture, basically. Are most accomplishments found through inherent talent of the people playing or learning within these fields, or are they practiced? Is the greatness natured or nurtured? And within this article, we can look down at a graph that they have provided here to kind of illustrate their point they make in this article. So after skimming this article, they make a clear delineation between talent and practice, and they link it back to genes, because genes, or a relation or a string of genes, can determine your aptitude or your talent identification for certain fields or skills. And within this thing, they say the heights or the level of aptitude you can reach within a certain field is dependent of your genotype, but also your external stimuli. So for example, within this graph here, we can see that they have two different sets of genotypes, genotype A and genotype B as an example. We can see that genotype B has a higher inclination for aptitude or the standard ability measure than genotype A for various different levels of external stimuli. But regardless of genotype B being more well off or having an easier time for aptitude depending on external stimuli, it doesn't mean that genotype A is doomed to always fall below someone with genotype B. For example, under certain environmental stimuli, genotype A, despite being less talented within a certain field, can reach close or the same or even beyond the levels of skill that someone having some genotype B would have. And it's all due to their external stimuli. So, what does this kind of tell us? What has all of this told us? What it's told us is that how good you can be at something is determinant of your genes. We'll call it a natural limit. Everyone's natural human limit or their hypothetical potential limit is different, and that difference comes to your genes. Having parents or having a lineage that was good at a thing that had showings of higher natural limits, and those genes can come down to you, and you could be also good at that thing, depending on what's dominant and recessive. The Punnett square from biology, if we all remember. But just because you have those genes does not determine whether you will be good at that thing. It is highly deterministic of your external stimuli, what you've practiced, what you've learned, how you've incorporated. Going back to the basketball example, just because your parents are basketball players and you were born tall, and maybe you were even born with a higher proclivity to be good at basketball, if you've never played basketball, then regardless of your genes and your height and your phenotypical characteristics, someone who is shorter to you and does not possess the same ceiling of your natural limit, because they have practiced basketball, because they have incorporated it and experienced more external stimuli, they will be inherently better than you because they've just activated more of that than you have. So this actually goes to forward what Swagkage was saying in his video, that while Naruto did have the potential to reach a higher natural limit than his peers, it goes to show that because he didn't have the opportunities like the other kids had, he wasn't able to receive the external stimuli that he needed in order to reach the peaks of his greatness. I don't think anyone's going to say that Naruto isn't a gifted person or wasn't somewhat talented in some regards. It's just that he never had the capabilities to reach it at the point in life when he was first introduced. For example, other children had their family members. So even if they didn't have a higher natural talent limit, they were able to practice with their family members. They were able to learn with their family members, seeing them visually, training with them, which would kind of lead them on this genotype B kind of curve or genotype A kind of curve where they received more environmental stimulation, and that they were able to reach a higher peak somewhere on this slope, where Naruto may have been a genotype B kind of person, and had his parents been alive and trained him, he might have been able to reach an even higher peak than they did, but he was an orphan. The only person really looking out for him was Hiruzen, and because of that lack of training, because of that lack of involvedness, and because of that lack of mentorship, he's kind of fallen down this slope here. We can kind of make the case for that being why. So this kind of goes to show that what Swagkage said was actually true. Just because Naruto's parents were gifted, Minato specifically, doesn't mean that he was born with the innate talent to be better, aside from phenotypical structures. For example, Naruto has a large amount of chakra pool, but that is because of his lineage as from the Uzumaki clan, because they are known to have really high chakra pools, and Naruto has received that phenotypical characteristic. He has a large chakra reserve, but anything that requires skill, anything that requires learning, anything that is not like a inherent observable born with trait, he cannot access the greats of his innate talent because he was never been allowed to work on them, like someone like Sasuke, who had, you know, his prodigy brother and his father and basically his whole clan to kind of learn and practice and have tutelage under. So that goes to show that Swagkage kind of hit the nail on the head with that one. He was absolutely right within his assessment of the series. This research kind of aided in what he was supporting. I was a little doubtful when I saw this, not about the whole video in general, just about this little section. But it actually, come to find out, he was actually really accurate with what he did. I'm sure he didn't look into the science behind it, but I have, and it checks out from what I was able to read. But yeah, that was very satisfying for me to answer. So that's really all I have for you today. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe. If you haven't seen the video, go check the video out. If you watched this all the way, I'm sure you'll enjoy that video. But other than that, that's really all I have for you today. So I hope y'all have a great day and peace out.